Welcome everyone. We have a really beautiful welcome to country coming up in just a moment. But first I would like to say my name is Mimi Kwa. I'm deeply honoured and thrilled to be here tonight. It was wonderful to be invited by the Committee of Gippsland. I used to work for the ABC with Mark DeBono and Kevin Carmody back in the day in Sale at the ABC offices, and it is always wonderful to be invited back. Now tonight, as we approach the precipice of the making of history, I cannot think of a more important legacy to be leaving to the world and our children than to say yes this referendum. Now, many people here are decided. Thank you. Many people here are decided and want to know how they can make a difference to help others to make up their minds. And there are some people here who are still unsure. So we hope that tonight will help bring light to both those predicaments. It is so wonderful to see you all, and it is now my great pleasure to invite to the stage Kurnai man Trey Moffat, who is now going to welcome you to country.
Womaninji, welcome everybody. My name is Trey Moffat and this is Jarrah. My other little man down there is River. Unfortunately he wasn't up here because it's not possum magic, so he's like, don't want nothing to do with it. We pay our respects to our ancestors, our Bundjalung borderline and our Bundjalung Warraka, past and present, and evolving. Thanks for our language, our stories and our knowledge. My little Boros and I belong to Kurnai, the first people on the lands that we're meeting on. Our land is bush country, freshwater country and sea country. Our ancestors are a part of everything we see, touch and feel. Their spirits will always be here, connected to this land, which makes us connected to this land too. On behalf of our ancestors and family and elders, we welcome you to the lands of the Kurnai Nation. Noel Pearson is here to give us his understanding on the referendum and the voice. As everyone knows, not everyone agrees with this voice, but we must respect each other's opinions and choices in the process. Being divided is not the answer in any situation. Hopefully Noel can shed some light on this matter and answer some of our questions. Thank you for taking your time out of your day, Noel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Trey. And I should have mentioned that Jarrah was also joining Trey on stage for that beautiful welcome to country. But River, Trey's other son, got a little bit of stage fright because apparently it wasn't possum magic, so he didn't want to have anything to do with it tonight. Anyway, please, another round of applause for Trey for that beautiful welcome to country. And I too would like to extend my respects to the people of the Kurnai land, a land that has never been ceded. Now, testament to the significance of our eminent and engaging guest speaker here tonight is the fact that so many of you stopped what you were doing in your lives to show up, because this clearly matters to you. It's a critical time of engagement around the conversation on the Indigenous voice to Parliament and the decision incumbent on all of us to propel us forward as a nation and a global citizen. Now, to introduce our guest speaker, it is my very great pleasure to welcome to the stage Gippsland Land and Waters Aboriginal Corporation CEO, Daniel Miller.
Thank you, Mimi, and thank you, Trey, for the welcome to country. And I've never been here before, and I'm really impressed with the venue and with the crowd that's come out tonight. So my name's Daniel Miller. I'm the CEO for the Gunai Kurnai Land and Waters Aboriginal Corporation, and it is my pleasure to introduce Noel. I did want to, a bit like Mimi said, I wanted to also pay my respects to all of you. For I think we probably have all walks of life here represented tonight to come out on a night that's a bit wet, which is unlike South Gippsland and West Gippsland, of course. But to come out on such an important issue and hear from someone who who was worth hearing speak about such an important thing. So, yeah, well done to all of you. So it is my great pleasure to introduce a senior person in the Voice campaign from Cape York, Brother Noel Pearson.
Thank you very much for your kindness. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands here, and I bring greetings from Cape York Peninsula. I'm so very humbled to have this opportunity to speak with you about the forthcoming referendum. I'm so grateful to the Committee for Gippsland for affording me this opportunity and their kindness today. I want to recite the lyrics of a favourite song. We got big things to do. Too soon our lives will be through. We got no time to stop and pick up no flowers. We've got catching up to do because we got big things to do. We got a song here to write, and we'll stay up most every night, and we'll be creating with hope that they will live on forever. We've got catching up to do. We got big things to do. I got no schooling, I've been fooling. This is why I can't find no job. And now it's over, no time left. And that's why I'm running so hard. We got a story to tell. We got to hurry. There's not much time left. But the sun will shine bright someday. We've got mountains to cross, because we're searching for time that we lost. We've got big things to do. We've got 6 weeks. This opportunity for Australians to complete the Commonwealth. What we achieved in 1901 and throughout the 20th century in this country was a great thing, but it missed an important component. And that component was the place of the original peoples in the new nation of Australia. When the Founding Fathers created the Commonwealth in 1901, they did not find a place for the original peoples. Australia since 1788 has been a country that has not known what to do with the pre-existing peoples. The colonists in 1788 knew there were people here. And they knew or suspected as much that the people owned their traditional homelands. And they also knew that their own law, brought from England, obliged some consideration of the rights of the original peoples. We now know from the High Court, with its decision on Mabo on 3 June 1992, that the English law brought by the colonists on their shoulders which fell to the ground and became the law of Australia, included the doctrine of native title to land. Native title is a doctrine of English law. Native title represents the intersection between English law and customary law of native peoples. It's the law of England that respects the land entitlements of the natives. And it was that law applied in Africa, Asia, the North Americas and New Zealand that gave rise to land rights in jurisdictions all over the world respected by the law of England. We were the last. On 3 June 1992, our High Court found the means to reconcile the truth of English law with the truth of native possession of their homelands. And how was that done? After 204 years and so much grief and so much dispossession and so much loss and so much depopulation, how could our High Court find a reconciliation between the truth of the law and the fact of history? What it did with Mabo and the subsequent decision in Wick, in which I was involved in Cape York Peninsula, the High Court said this: the whitefellas have got to keep everything they've gained. That was the first principle. No one who'd gained anything in the 2 centuries was obliged to lose it. The second principle adopted by the High Court was, well, the traditional owners should get the rest of their estates. The remaining land should be accorded to them because it has been their title since the coming of English law in 1788. So the indigenous peoples and the traditional owners were to get what was left over. And the third principle, effected by the High Court, was there are some categories of land owned by the Crown where the 2 titles sit together, the native title and the Crown title. In national parks, Crown lands and pastoral leases. Think about it. Those 3 principles of native title effected a reconciliation between history and law, between the original peoples and the peoples who came after 1788. We dealt with land and the grievance surrounding it without resort to violence or ongoing political conflict. Rather, our law and our High Court set out the terms of reconciliation. In 2 years' time, we will settle all outstanding native title claims in Cape York Peninsula. The Mabo decision over the last 30 years, whilst not perfect in its implementation, has delivered land justice. And we have our law to thank for it. Ructions all over the planet concern land and disputation in relation to it. It is at the centre of conflicts between peoples and within nations all over the planet, and yet here in Australia we have in the last 30 years effected a compromise. A compromise where the descendants of the settlers did not lose 1 square metre of land. We now stand to effect another important component of justice arising from our history, and that is the recognition of the people in our constitutional structure. In 2007 and the years leading up to that, myself and other leaders were involved in advocating to the then Prime Minister Howard that constitutional recognition should be an agenda for him in his remaining term of Parliament. He went into the 2007 federal election with an explicit commitment made at his very first speech upon the campaign starting. And he committed to the Sydney Institute in that speech that he would move within 18 months of being re-elected to put a referendum to the Australian people to recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in the Constitution. What we are doing on October the 14th is a process that began with Mr. Howard. Now, he had the idea of rerunning his failed preambular recognition of 1999. You may recall that the Republic referendum was defeated, but there was also a referendum about recognition, which Mr. Howard had championed, and it was rejected by the Australian people. Indigenous people did not want preambular recognition, and there were very good reasons why that attempt had failed. I said to Mr. Howard at the time, "You're going to rerun something that has already been rejected by the Australian people." I said the model for recognition needed to be the subject of public consultation. And that process began in earnest when Prime Minister Julia Gillard came to power in 2010. She set up an expert panel made up of Liberal appointees and Labor appointees and legal officers, chaired by Mark Liebler from Melbourne and Senator Pat Dodson, before he became Senator, from Western Australia. And that process went on during 2011 and 12 and produced a report for the Parliament on models for recognition. The model that was most prominent from 2011-12 was a model to guarantee a freedom from discrimination under the Constitution. This was a proposal supported by both sides of the political aisle, or at least on the part of voters. And despite the consensus amongst the voting public that a guarantee against discrimination would be a great advance, there was a vehement opposition to it from constitutional conservatives. Constitutional conservatives rejected the non-discrimination proposal. They regarded a guarantee against discrimination as a one-clause Bill of Rights. Two years after this vehement opposition had almost stalled the process of recognition, I went to see the leading constitutional conservative, Professor Greg Craven, Vice-Chancellor at the Australian Catholic University in North Sydney. In attendance at that meeting was Julian Leeser, who would later become a Liberal Member of Parliament and a spokesman for Indigenous affairs for opposition leader Peter Dutton. Out of those discussions with Leeser and Craven came the idea that rather than a one-clause Bill of Rights prohibiting discrimination, perhaps Indigenous people could have a say to the Parliament about laws affecting them. My point is that the voice to Parliament was developed with conservative legal and political leaders. It was the result of consultations and dialogue involving constitutional conservatives. And for most of the 10 years past, this was a largely conservative-driven proposal. The progressives were nowhere in the picture. I don't believe I had one conversation with a Labor Member of Parliament. All of the conversations since 2013 were with Conservatives in Parliament. All Conservative Prime Ministers in that period successively supported recognition in the Constitution. The proposal was put to Prime Minister Abbott in 2014. The proposal referred to Parliament and the executive government. I recall one time driving up the highway north of Brisbane when I get a phone call from the then Prime Minister Abbott, who says, "Noel, mate, this is a bit complicated, the voice. Maybe we should allow Indigenous people to select their own senators." And I said to Tony, "Mate, you think the voice is hard? We've got no chance getting senators up in a referendum." Every election, both sides of politics since 2007 have been committed to constitutional recognition. That's 15 years. 3 parliamentary inquiries over that period, 3 public consultation processes right around the country, and all of the options eventually led to the Uluru Statement from the Heart calling for a voice to Parliament and the executive government. Our anxiety was to maintain bipartisanship. Our theory was that we needed the Conservatives to own this. We wanted the Conservatives to own this so that we could get bipartisanship in a referendum campaign. And we invested so much into retaining that bipartisanship. And we succeeded. We largely succeeded for almost 15 years. It all fell apart last November when the National Party decided they were not going to support the Voice. And I could show you notes of all of the meetings we had with half of those characters in the National Party room, who were supportive of the Voice, who told us they had Aboriginal people in their electorate, who understood the importance of the proposal. In fact, I had more positive conversations with National Party people than I did with the Liberals. And yet, when the time came in last November, when the new leader, Little Proud, decided that his party was going to vote against the Voice, everybody fell into line, including about more than a dozen members who had been committed to the Voice. It was the same with the Liberal Party room when they eventually decided to vote no earlier this year. Not the least Russell Broadbent, who wrote an essay in a book titled Statements from the Soul, responding to the Uluru Statement from the Heart. This essay traverses everything from the New Testament, all in support of the Voice, and saying that he would fight till his last breath to honour the Uluru Statement from the Heart. We can win this referendum notwithstanding that chicanery. We can win this referendum, and I've been around the countryside and the mood is there to do something good for Australia. We're going to have to summon up the better angels of our nature to prevail over the misrepresentation and lies and anger and fear that the No campaign is throwing against recognition. There's been all kinds of issues raised against the proposal, and yet our primary consideration from the very beginning was to construct a proposal that was constitutionally safe. That was why we engaged with constitutional conservatives. We wanted to make sure that the provision respected the Constitution. And that we did. 2 former Chief Justices of the High Court conducted due diligence on the provisions and advised changes to make sure that absolutely the provision was safe and would uphold the Constitution whilst recognising Indigenous peoples. The question of whether we would recognise the prior peoples is still a question upon us. It lies at the heart of this. The country didn't come to terms with it when we formed the Federation. We didn't ask and we didn't answer the question, well, what about the people who were before, who were here before? That was what left the lacuna in our Constitution, the missing piece. And we finally have the opportunity to close the missing piece and recognise the First Peoples. And when we do that, we'll not only complete our Constitution, but we'll complete our identity. We will from here on know who we are as Australians. We're not just a people who suddenly appeared in 1788. We'll actually understand that we're part of a grand, epic story going back long millennia. It will be Australian to recognise that. And we'll recognise also that our British democracy is part of our heritage. It's captured in the Constitution. Our British democracy is inescapably part of our heritage. But we'll also recognise that the thing that we've achieved in Australia here is this glorious multicultural unity. Our multicultural unity is a beacon to the world and is one of our three stories of Australia: the Indigenous heritage, the British democracy, and this multicultural triumph. Those are the three stories of Australia. It is who we are. When we ask ourselves, who are the Australians? Surely, plain as the nose on our face, are these three stories. Let me say one last thing. Recognition is a mirror. It would be absurd if it was not. Recognition is not just about recognising the poor Indigenous people. Yes, in a power sense, in a democratic sense, you are recognising Indigenous people by amending the Constitution. But isn't there also a necessity to be recognised by Indigenous people? And that goes to our identity and our culture and our sense of place in this country. By recognising Indigenous people are recognising you. And we see each other in our own eyes. That is the unstated result and implication from this referendum. We're going to go into a future where none of us is uncertain about our place in this country. We have no longer any hang-ups to bequeath to our children. Let's not keep the switch on no. No has always been our default position for too long. And the cost of no, the cost of defaulting to no, is all of the misery that our people have endured and still endure today. We've got to move forward to yes. We can't just kick this can down the road again. It's taken 15 years to reach this point, but that is nothing compared to the campaigns of our elders going back to the 1930s. Ours is just a continuation of those campaigns. And we finally have the opportunity as Australians to make right something that was wrong. And whenever it is we have the opportunity to make right something that has been wrong for too long, why would we not seize it? And we'll show the world, I believe we will show the world that it is never too late to reconcile. Notwithstanding all of the grief and hardship and anger and distrust of history, it is never too late to reconcile if it is done on the basis of justice. So I'm just so gratified to have this opportunity to speak with the people of Gippsland. I've been so moved by your openness today when I've met people. I think about my people in Cape York, I think about people in Arnhem Land that I know, and if I could tell them that they are good people, they're good Australians that want to do this, that are anxious about this opportunity, I'm really very much urging you all to take responsibility. This is your country. This is your constitution. This is the power the Constitution gives all of you. And I hope that we can get the right result on October the 14th. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Wonderful keynote. Before we get into questions, tell us a little bit about that song, how it came together, all of the collaborators involved.
Okay, that's the Hopevale Dora, Auntie Dora, and the Hopevale Dirt Band, Red Dirt Band. And they decided to record the song. They're a bit jaundiced in support of me and the
It's also
campaign.
very difficult to put the word constitution into a song, right?
I'm very proud of it.
It's wonderful. Now, the Committee for Gippsland put it out to Gippsland to put in some questions for you.
For sure.
I have some of these questions here.
Yep.
You know, you talked about history and stories. But Gippsland is asking, what will Gippsland look like after the 14th of October with a successful yes?
I think that we will move to a new era where Indigenous people are part of the Australian community in all of its aspects. Culturally, socially, politically, economically. And the existence of our culture and languages around the country will be something that we share with the wider Australian community. We have so many languages that are on the cusp of disappearance. We actually need Australians to learn these languages. And we need to make the preservation of our languages a national project. We should all be as anxious as the owners of these languages for the survival of them. And so I think the achievement of the referendum will launch the country into a new era. Too many Australians don't know that this heritage, who does it belong to and why is it here and what relationship do we have with it? I think emphatically the country will move to an era where this heritage is ours. This is the country's heritage. And we will have a relationship to it that is underpinned by pride in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture, as well as a duty to ensure that this cultural heritage is maintained. I think, but in a whole lot of arenas, both in terms of economic development of regions, I foresee that Indigenous people will be integral to the development of towns and regions across the country. It has to happen. It'll be a good thing when it does.
And I've heard you say, Noel, that this yes is a step out of the native and coloniser narrative.
I think the problem is we still live in the old colonial mindset that there were settlers and then there were natives. And we try to shove the natives to the back of the canvas as occupying places at the margins. We're going to, I think, put that behind us. We'll understand ourselves as Australians now. with three stories. One, the original story of the Indigenous peoples. Two, the story of British colonisation and the construction of a democracy that is really has its provenance, has its origins in Britain. But also the third part of the story is this multicultural success that we've achieved. I think that'll become our new understanding of each other. And the old settler native thing will pass into history.
So there's clearly so much to be gained with a yes, but there is also a lot of misinformation that is being spread. So we would love to hear from you, Noel Pearson. What do you think is the best way to address the naysayers and to address the situations that we find ourselves in from day to day, where we are trying to gently help somebody to understand the facts of the matter without getting into a debate, because it can become quite confrontational.
Every great reform has had a no campaign attached to it. When suffrage for women was first proposed in South Australia, there was a no campaign. And if the proponents of suffrage had not pressed ahead and succeeded, we wouldn't have had the example for all of the other states across Australia and around the world. South Australia basically led the world on the right of women to vote. And yet those campaigners faced a tough resistance. Australia itself was resisted. There was a no campaign against the Federation in 1901. It took 3 goes at a referendum to get Australia up. And so I'm always of the view that yes, no is necessary part of the democratic process, and we've got to answer their objections. We've got to provide a more compelling case to the Australian people.
How do we have those grassroots conversations?
Okay, my view is that the first thing is to have reference to the actual provision itself, what is proposed. It's 92 words. It's in plain English. You don't need to be a constitutional lawyer to understand what the provision is. And essentially there's 4 parts to the alteration that we're asked to vote on. One is the recognition part, and the words are these: in recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first peoples of Australia. So weigh that up. Could we authorise those words to go into the Constitution? The second thing is a guarantee. It's a guarantee from the Australian people to the Indigenous people. What is that guarantee? There shall be a body to be called the Voice. That's a kind of commitment that the country is giving to Indigenous people, that there shall be a body to be called the Voice. The third thing that the provision does is it then says, well, what's the role of this body? And the role of the body, or the purpose, is to make representations to the Parliament and the executive government. That's the role. And Anne Toomey, a revered constitutional lawyer from Sydney, makes the pretty straight point that to make representations is what everybody does in a democracy. You can make representations and they can hear you or they can tell you to go. There's no guarantee when you make a representation. If you want your representation to be heard and followed, well, you've got to be persuasive. You've got to have a compelling case. So that's what we do in a democracy. We make representations. But further on in that clause are the words, on matters relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. That's what we're allowed to make representations on matters relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. I can't see an argument as to why making representations on nuclear submarines falls within that definition. Or parking tickets. I'd like it to, but I don't think we're going to succeed. And finally is the question of detail. If you want, you've heard about the detail argument. Where's the detail? Who's hiding the detail? What cupboard is the detail in? Well, these are the words. The Parliament shall have power to make laws. You think those laws are about detail? Yes. And who's responsible for those details? The Parliament. Is it the government? No. Government can't make laws. The Parliament makes the laws. Is it the Prime Minister that makes the laws? No. The Prime Minister might propose a law, but he's got to get it through the Parliament. Jackie Lambie, Pauline Hanson, the Greens, Peter Dutton and the Liberals, Darren Chester and the Nationals, all of these people are responsible for making laws. They are responsible for the detail.
And who elects those people?
We do.
On that note, something that I have found myself saying to people is that the Constitution says that we must pay taxes, but there is no detail of those taxes.
Correct.
It is the tax department and the government that take care of that. So how do we in Gippsland best activate local leadership to share influence and to have those conversations at a higher level so that that trickles down through the community?
Oh, we need volunteers for the campaign. It's the most important thing we can do is to volunteer. Go to yes23.com. We've got 30,000 plus volunteers signed up all across the country. It is the largest mobilisation of volunteer effort in any political campaign. And it's growing every week. And we need to have conversations with people based on the facts. And the facts are here. And
Where can people get that from?
at the Yes23 website is a template of this card.
The Yes23 website is also a fantastic resource for a guide to having conversations.
Yes.
And to staying open in those conversations.
Correct.
And not becoming combative.
Yeah.
To be able to listen open-heartedly and then deliver your point of view.
Yep.
Sorry, I cut you off there. With train of thought, we were talking about leadership in Gippsland, and you were talking about recruiting volunteers and what important work volunteers do.
Absolutely. Well, we've got to get out, have conversations, ensure that people understand that this is an Indigenous proposal. It was what was proposed from the Uluru Statement after a very long period of consultation around the country. It is not a government proposal. Quite frankly, the Labor Party only came into this late in the piece. Out of the last 12 years since Julia Gillard set up the expert panel, 9 of them, up until May last year, were years under Conservative prime ministerships. Abbott, Turnbull, Morrison, all of them went to elections with commitments for constitutional recognition. All of the work that was done, massive amount of work by parliamentary committees, public consultation processes, all of that work was done under the aegis of Liberal governments.
And it's very important to remind people of this because that is too easily forgotten.
Oh, and all that, now I get mixed up with this metaphor. All that Albanese did was pick up the ball and run with it. I don't know about punting or kicking or anything like that. In our view of the world, picking up the ball and running with it is the correct manoeuvre. And so that's what Albanese did last May. He has simply picked up the ball, and it is not his idea. He has just accepted the invitation from Uluru that this is the form of recognition that Indigenous people wanted. And I'm just so bitterly disappointed that the Conservatives have betrayed us at a late hour.
Tell us about the demographics of people who are yes, and what is the general demographic of the feedback that you're getting of people who are still on the fence?
Okay, plus 55 whites.
On the fence?
Are our most difficult constituency. And you know what? That's what our pollsters say, but that is not what my experience over the last 7 weeks has told me. Everywhere around the country, I am talking to people like you. I'm talking to grandparents, parents, great-grandparents who want to leave something better for their children, who want to leave a better country for future generations. And so it's at odds with the polling, actually, or what our pollsters tell us. Of course, our most supportive are young people. Your young people are telling our pollsters almost down to the last that, why is this even a question?
Already know that they don't want to be bequeathed a story of not recognising our
Correct,
First Nations
absolutely, absolutely.
So how can young people who are not even, some of whom are not even old enough to have a say in the referendum, how can they get involved? Is that through volunteering as well? Having the conversations with their grandparents who might not
Yes.
yet be decided.
Oh, I think I went to Byron's. Was it Byron Bay? Yeah. I went to Byron Bay School, and the kids who are not of voting age are so passionate about this referendum.
Maybe we should lower the voting age.
Well, I tried to think about a solution for that, but young people are extremely engaged in this, and I'm really quietly hopeful that Victoria's great. I just love the audience here and what the reception and the feeling I've got down here in Gippsland. It's a struggle in Queensland, my home state, and I'm I come from Cape York. I'm a Queenslander. Eddie Marburg came from Queensland. The Torres Strait Islanders live in Queensland. And yet it is our hardest state. We've got to keep working with Queenslanders. And there's certainly a big volunteer effort going on up there. But I'm just so gratified with what I'm coming across in Victoria and country Victoria. This is this is a real shot in the arm for me.
Noel Pearson, what are some last words of hope and inspiration that you'd like to leave us with?
The joint is going to be much better when we do this. Yeah, thank you.
To end our formalities for this evening. But as he's coming up to the stage, I'd like to say that, Noel, you referred us to the Yes 23 website. If any of you want to take a photo of Noel before you go and post it on your socials and hashtag Yes23AU, that will also help to spread the word. Thank you. Thank you, Tony.
Thanks very much, Mimi. I just want to take a quick moment to thank everyone here tonight for attending and joining us for our session with Noel. I'd particularly like to thank you, Noel, for visiting Gippsland today and making it a day and sharing your insights, your experience with us both tonight, but also earlier today where we had an event in Traralgon as well. So really crossing the region of Gippsland. Noel, your capacity to explain, remain patient, listen and provide context in order to bring people along makes you an outstanding narrator of our time, and I think an example to us all on how we can engage in meaningful conversations. So thank you for showing that to us today, but also over your course of your life. I'd also like to thank Mimi for doing such a great job this evening in hosting. And another thank you I'd like to extend is to our sponsors for tonight, which without their support and contribution, it makes bringing things like this to Gippsland that little bit harder. So really appreciate the support of Energy Australia, Star of the South, Blue Float Energy, Latrobe Community Health Service and the Gippsland Climate Change Network. Really appreciate you in getting behind an event like this and ensuring that we all have an opportunity to engage in this conversation. And finally, as part of tonight's event, we are having the event recorded and filmed. As you may have seen a person doing the rounds with a camera. If you do want to share your thoughts and your views on the evening tonight, please feel free to stop the person with the camera and share your contributions. It will be made public, and so it will be going online, and then everyone here will be able to share it through your own networks, through your own platforms, which will help spread that message that Noel so well articulated tonight. But once again, thank you to Noel for being the person that you are, but also for spreading the messages that you are for Australia, and particularly here in Gippsland. I'd also like to acknowledge Daniel Miller from Glawak in helping bring this together as well. It's been a big piece of work for us as a committee for Gippsland to organise and deliver, but with the support of our partners like Glawak, our sponsors and people across Gippsland, really pleased to see so many here today, but also the reception that Noel has received today has been really impressive, and I think really reinforces why we should all be proud to be Gippslanders. So thank you again, and thank you to Noel.